Test, test. We'll be starting in 1 minute. In the front, there's room over here on the side. There's room over here. There's room up here if you'd like to take over my role. Wow, what a turnout. This is fantastic. Raylene, have we got the majority? All right, then we're going to start. Wow, thank you everyone for coming. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here and starting a public bank in Sacramento. Wow, this is just a fabulous turnout. Thank you so much, everyone. My name's Doug MacPherson. This is my wife, Goli Sahba. Well, I should say Dr. Goli Sahba. I got to keep things right in my household. With many passionate volunteers, we've been leading the effort here including Katie Valenzuela, we've been leading the effort here to try to start a public bank here in Sacramento. And we're so excited to have everyone here to be a part of this. We'll be doing a brief overview of what a public bank is, my wife and I, and then we're going to have our panelists talk about public banks with our moderator, Chris Brown. Then we'll have a chance to do some questions and answers at the mic at the center here later on, and then we'll also be getting your input. So that's fantastic. The first thing I really want to do is I want to thank all the organizations that make this possible. The Sacramento Climate Coalition, Sacramento Bay Area Congregation Together, SacAct, Third Act, and all their volunteers, the Parkside Community Church here, the California Public Banking Alliance, all these organizations helped us. So a big round of applause for all those groups that helped make this happen. Yeah, wow, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do this without a lot of support and a lot of people wanting this to happen. The next thing I want to talk, I guess I'm told, exits and bathrooms. So there are exits here, in the back where you came in, and here. So if there's an emergency, those are your exits. Thank you, Goli. Bathrooms, could you point out the bathrooms? Out and to the right or left are the bathrooms. And then the final obligatory announcement, silence your cell phones, please. Okay, we got that done. All right, and I want to thank all the tablers, and Goli has a list.
All right, well, we were so happy you guys could come and be a part of this. So we had Third Act, Move to Amend, Poor People's Campaign, Red, Green, and Black Coalition, DSA, SAC Climate Coalition, SAC Public Bank, of course, Reinvest, Sacramento, 350, they were ill, so they couldn't join us, but Social Justice Politicor, Strong Sacktown, SacAct, and CalCare. If I missed you, I am so sorry. Fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and tabling. That's wonderful. Okay, let me explain the half sheets that you all should be sitting on, or you were going to sit on, but you noticed it and you put it in your hands. Those half sheets are for us and for you. We'd love you during the course of this presentation. If you have any ideas or things that you think about a public bank, jot those down on there. I think there were pencils that went with them. And then we are going to have an exercise at the very end of the event. We'll be using those sheets, as well as we'll be collecting them in the back, because we want your input. This is a community endeavor, and we want the community's input to help make this happen. So that'll be happening. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, hold them to then, and we'll get to your questions then. Now let's go on to the show here. Let me ask the group here. So there's organizations out there that do surveys of how happy nations are. And recently, can anybody tell me who they think the happiest nations are on the planet? I heard Finland, Denmark. You're all on the right. I didn't hear the United States. We're in the top 20, barely. Can I have the first slide, please? Well, let me give you the 7 happiest. You guys got most of them. Finland, Denmark, Iceland. My wife's saying I'm too loud. Sweden, Netherlands. And what do they all have in common? What do all these 7 happiest nations? They all have public banks. That's right, they all have public banks. And why do they have public banks? They basically, these elected governments, they have a social contract with the people in their nation to provide health care, affordable housing, education, and other opportunities for their people. And the public banks that they have in those nations play a huge role in making that happen. And we're going to hear more about that tonight and how we could have that here in California. Next slide, please.
All right, so public banks exist all around the world. There's almost $50 trillion held in over 900 public banks. In the U.S., we don't hear much about it, but the one bank that we do have is the Bank of North Dakota, which has successfully operated for over 100 years. I'll talk more about that later.
Next slide, please. So what is a public bank? It's just like a private bank in the sense that it can take deposits and can make loans. The biggest difference is it's a nonprofit entity owned by a public institution like the city of Sacramento or even the county of Sacramento. And the shareholders, us, all of us, we are the shareholders of that bank. Not shareholders in Wall Street, but us, the community members. Another really big, important difference between a public bank and a private bank is a public bank is mandated to help the other local banks here in the area, as well as the local credit unions in the area. So a public bank can really be a supportive entity and really making things available to our community in partnership with other lending institutions that we have here today. Next slide, please.
So some of the benefits of the public banks, you'll be hearing about that from this panel, but I just want to give a couple examples. One would be direct community benefits, like helping with affordable housing, investments in affordable housing, and small business lending. As far as for taxpayer savings, it would support the local economy because basically it would build a stronger tax base as it gives lends to small businesses. They can also double community investment power by reducing the borrowing costs, which often can be up to 50% of, say, if you get a bond for building bridges or whatever. And also the 10-time multiplier power of banks, we would get that in our hands. So $10 million, if the public bank has it, they could generate up to $100 million in lending.
Next slide. Let's talk about one of my favorite advantages of a public bank, and that's interest on long-term debt. Imagine that the city of Sacramento wants to refurbish its streets. It goes out and passes a $1 billion bond in order to make that happen. Where does the money for the $1 billion bond come from? We have to go to Wall Street banks, some of the 4 big banks, and borrow that money from those banks. Then the city has to pay that loan back, and when it pays that loan back, tens of millions of dollars in interest on that loan flow out of our community and flows to these large Wall Street banks. If we had a fully capitalized public bank here in Sacramento, it could make that loan to the city. It would make it that loan, the interest from that loan would come back to the public bank, and then it could be used for all the things that we need in our community. The money would stay within our community. One of the reasons I really like the idea of a public bank. Next slide.
And really, public banking works, and the proof of concept is the Bank of North Dakota. According to a Wall Street Journal article, the Bank of North Dakota was 70% more profitable than Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. It also held a greater credit rating than Chase. Also, it's done really great things, but one was it remained highly profitable even in the 2008 financial crisis when 49 state treasuries were in the red ink.
Let's talk briefly about, next slide please, about how public banking started here in California. In 2019, a group of really dedicated grassroots individuals led by Trinity Tran to my left went to the state, yes, give her a round of applause. That grassroots effort, no lobbyists involved, went to the state legislature and said, this is a great idea. We need public banks here in California. They went to the legislature, they convinced the legislature that this was the right thing to do, they convinced the governor it was the right thing to do, and in 2019 they got passed AB 857, which enables us in California, in our cities and counties, to have public banks. It was a major, incredible, successful thing. And the thing I want to really point out is, in 2019, The entire legislature of California and the governor thought this was a great idea, and they were right. Next paragraph, next slide, please.
And I think you probably wanted to say that if it was a great idea then, it's even more of a good idea now. And so I want to talk a little bit about the banking movement across California. Really, it's a movement all across the U.S., but California is leading it. And so within California, we can have up to 10 public banks based on that law that Doug just mentioned. Trinity represents the LA Public Bank, and they're doing amazingly well. San Francisco, we've got Rick here. He's the lead for the San Francisco Public Bank. They're doing great. East Bay is one of the furthest ones along. It's with 4 different entities. And then also Central Coast cities have gotten together. They're working on it. And most recently, Fresno. But there are others in San Diego and et cetera.
Okay, next slide. Let's talk about where we stand here now in the city of Sacramento. In 2023, Councilmember Katie Valenzuela at the time and a group of grassroots activists, including myself and my wife and many of the people here, said we need a public bank here in Sacramento. And we went to the city council and we went to Mayor Steinberg and we said, we got a great idea. We want to start a public bank here in Sacramento using the framework behind AB 857. And the city council and the mayor said, yes, we agree that's a great idea. We're going to give you $250,000 of seed money to start that process. Go out and hire a consultant and let's get the business plan done. And we went out and we did that, and we were one day away from selecting the outfit that was going to do that. And the general manager, the city manager at the time said, the deficits next year aren't going to allow us to do that, and he pulled the money. Very, very unfortunate. But we're not giving up. Where the money's there, we're going to go get it. Yeah, I see a lot of downtime. Absolutely. But I think the point I want to make, my wife stole my thunder, is in 2019, this is a fabulous idea. This is a fabulous idea. The legislature, my wife stole my thunder. And in 2024, it was an even better idea for here in the city of Sacramento. And right now, it makes even more sense with what's going on around the country to have a public bank here in Sacramento. So yeah, again, thank you everyone for coming. We definitely want to, so we're going to learn more about public banking from the experts here up at our table here. Let me introduce our moderator for this next part, and that's Chris Brown. Chris is a lifetime activist. Many of you may know Chris. Since 2014, he's been an organizer, mentor, and leader in the International Climate Emergency Campaign here in Sacramento. He currently serves in the leadership of California Climate Voters and the Sacramento leader of the Sacramento Climate Coalition, and he won the prestigious Ecos Environmentalist of the Year Award in 2023. Round of applause for Chris and all his efforts. Chris, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Fantastic presentation, Goli and Doug. Thank you all for starting us off in such a great highlight and giving us a good background. But we have a fantastic panel tonight. I'm going to introduce all of the panelists, and then we're going to go into a discussion. We're going to hear from each of them, and then have some time for discussion. And then we're going to open the mic up, as Doug said, and let you all ask questions. So let's get started. Our first speaker tonight is going to be Trinity Tran, who we just met, the executive director and co-founder of California Public Banking Alliance, which led the campaign for the law in 2019, AB 857, that was the first law in the nation to allow cities and regions to organize public banks. She's also the lead on the Cal Account, a first of its kind universal banking system initiative, and co-founder of Public Bank LA. After Trinity, I'd like to welcome an old friend, Katie Valenzuela, who I first met more than a decade ago when one of my sons was a volunteer with her community-based organization doing basically farming in the food desert of South Oak Park. And Katie has been doing this kind of seminal work in building community for a long time. Not only has she been successful as an organizer, of course, most of us know her as a city councilwoman, where she was the first Democratic Socialist elected to our city council. While she was doing all that, she's also been an environmental justice leader and advocate around the state for a number of different grassroots organizations over the years. After Katie, we have Dr. Flo Cofer, who has basically, well, you all know. I don't know that I need to tell you all this stuff, but she's an epidemiologist and a public health expert and advocate who has led a number of successful grassroots campaigns advocating for public health, reproductive justice, and community-centered public safety. Dr. Cofer is not only a talented organizer, but she brings a constant message that says, more is possible. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Mark Sawyer, a Sacramento native and retired childhood educator who graduated from UC Berkeley and got a Master of Divinity and is a member here at Parkside Church. So he's going to bring a bit of that sacred space into this sacred space with his talk. But he has become, over the last 3 years, a key advocate for affordable housing through SacAct, and also, luckily for us, on the leadership team of the Sacramento Public Bank campaign. So welcome, all of you. And first, I'd like to, Trinity, if you could tell us a little bit about why now is the moment and what kind of partnerships we need to develop in order to be successful.
Great, thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. This is actually an exciting moment for Sacramento because this is Sacramento's first community town hall on public banking. So it's an exciting first, so thank you so much for joining us. So I want to take a moment to level set on where we are and why public banking matters now. We're in a moment now where it feels like the ground is shifting beneath our public systems, and our working families and our cities are being asked to absorb more. Between the chaos and the volatility that we're seeing at the federal administration under Trump, multiple core funding streams are getting impacted: housing, climate, small business, infrastructure across the board, on top of rising costs of living, on top of local deficits. So all of it is hitting all at once, so the pressures are stacking. So cities and states across the nation right now are facing massive budget deficits. They are cash strapped, they are in the red. And meanwhile, affordable housing projects are stalled because the financing is fragmented, it's expensive. You have infrastructure modernization that's underfunded. And the climate crisis is accelerating without the funding needed to match the scale of what we need to build. So the question isn't just, is there enough money? The question is, regardless of what happens at the federal level with federal funding, who decides where our public dollars go today and how they're used, and whether they stay in our communities and benefit our localities, or do they keep getting siphoned out to private institutions that don't answer to our communities? So because right now we're paying Wall Street banks millions annually to manage our public projects. In Los Angeles alone, we pay about $1.4 billion in debt service. That's principal plus interest, and that includes over $300 million annually in fees extracted out of our communities to big banks and private financial institutions. So you can imagine the possibilities if you could recapture some of those funds and recirculate it back into our communities to build homes and to build schools and to support public projects in our communities. So the volatility that is coming out of Washington right now has exposed one very core fundamental problem, and that is we've built our local economies on financial systems that we don't control. So the public revenue that we generate, so the taxes, the fines, the fees, the billions of dollars that our cities accrue, our public funds right now get parked in Wall Street banks. Wall Street banks then leverages our public funds to finance areas that generate short-term profit for private shareholders. So what are they investing in? They're investing in fossil fuel projects. They're investing in private prisons and immigrant detention centers and weapons manufacturers in the military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, our cities can't access basic credit and affordable housing can't get built because it doesn't generate enough revenue for the banks lending the money. So the goal is simple. It's we have public dollars. The point is simple, is that we have public dollars, but we don't have enough control over how those public dollars are used. So the why now, why public banking now is pretty simple. It's because the cost of waiting is rising. And like Doug and Goli mentioned in their presentation, we have a path now before us. We laid the groundwork with the passage of the California Public Banking Act. And in 2019, the regulations for that weren't finalized until 2022. So now we've got the groundwork laid. That was the nation's first legal framework, the first bill enabling cities and counties across California to be able to form their own banks. So now we've got the groundwork laid. We are moving into the rollout and implementation phase. So, public banking is about creating the public financial infrastructure that our cities are missing. So this isn't a retail bank with an ATM and a bank teller and retail locations on every corner. This is a wholesale bank or a banker's bank. And you can kind of envision it like a back office. And the goal is simple, is to lower the cost of capital for our cities and so that they can do more with what we have. And so that we can maximize the impact of our tax dollars and support community lenders who are already doing the work on the ground. So that's where the partnership, as Chris mentioned, the partnership part of this is so critical, because public banks aren't meant to replace smaller local banks within a public within the financial ecosystem. They're meant to strengthen them, and that means that they partner with local community banks, credit unions, CDFIs, community financial development institutions, which are mission-driven lenders. So they partner with smaller local banks and infuse them with capital so that they can amplify the work that they're already doing on the ground. So I'll walk briefly just through the partnership mechanics in plain terms. That means, a municipal bank's job is to lower the cost of capital, as I mentioned, for our local government and for community lenders. As a public nonprofit corporation, it's a tax-exempt it's a tax-exempt bank similar to credit unions. So that means that Sacramento would be able to keep more of its public dollars in its public bank rather than sending it off to Wall Street. So that pool of money becomes the lending base. And so if the city wants to build a bridge, for instance, it would turn to its public bank for a direct infrastructure loan at lower cost. So the power of a public bank really comes in its ability to leverage, which Goli touched on in her presentation. So a public bank can leverage public funds up to 10 times. So it can leverage its capital up to 10 times to create lending for our communities. That means $1 in a public bank can create $10 in community lending. $1 million in a public bank can be leveraged to create $10 million in community lending. And that is fractional reserve lending, which is the power that all banks can do. But with a public bank, you're leveraging to build homes and to build schools and to fix our streets, and you're not leveraging to build fossil fuel projects and weapons of war. So when loans are repaid, as Doug also touched on, so that when loans are repaid, that money cycles back into a public bank, and then so that it can be relent out again. And that way, you're creating a cyclical, self-reinforcing cycle of capital for our cities. Rather, because right now, when our city or one of its departments spends money on debt or interest, that money essentially leaves the city, and it doesn't return. So with a public bank, you're able to recycle public dollars, and you're able to create a permanent, revolving, community-owned source of capital that can be reinvested year after year after year. So that same model also supports borrowing for the public. So the public bank partners with local community lenders. So it would partner with Sacramento's community banks, credit unions, and CDFIs. A local lender would go to, a member of the public would go to their local lender, not to City Hall. So the public bank would sign co-lending and partnership agreement with the bank. It would underwrite the loan, and public bank would come in and put a slice of the capital in, 50% or higher, to make the deal pencil and to make it affordable. So the more that we support community banks and credit unions and CDFIs, the more that supports the constituencies within the locality, because that means a low cost loan for a low cost affordable housing loan for working families. That means affordable housing developers would be able to get the capital, that the cash flow that they need to be able to buy and preserve existing affordable housing units, build new affordable housing units. That means low cost loans for small businesses. So this is about amplifying the work that community lenders are already doing on the ground. So the roadmap to creating a public bank is pretty straightforward. It's the California Public Banking Act. Through the California Public Banking Act, the first step is to create a feasibility study, or what's called a viability study. So that is what Doug had mentioned. That's what the city of Sacramento had issued an RFQ to hire consultants to write that study. And why that's important, because that lays out how this makes sense for Sacramento. What the missions are, the mission, the mandates, the governance structure, the financial models, the capitalization strategies, the lending priorities, like how this bank is going to be economically viable for the people of Sacramento and for the city of Sacramento. So that, the crux of that, all the details of that is going to be moved into a business plan, which is the second step, where the city, local government selects a financial model and then submits an application for a public bank license to the Department of Financial Protection Innovation Agency, which is our state regulators. And then the third step is to get approval from the FDIC. So those are the straightforward steps to creating a public bank. Most cities, there are multiple local governments, as Goli mentioned, right now in various stages of exploring a public bank, working on capitalization, finalizing their business plans. So since 2022, when the regulations were finalized, there's been now concrete resources from the biggest local governments in the state of California to move forward in implementing these banks. And our goal with the California Public Banking Alliance is to create a network of socially and environmentally responsible public banks. So it's an exciting moment. So as cities are moving forward with public banking, now is the moment for Sacramento to rise up. This is the moment for political boldness and community action, and for Sacramento to take the first steps to create a locally controlled tool, a local financial institution, so that you can leverage your public dollars to support public good that explicitly supports Sacramento's communities. So, I'll stop.
All right, thanks, Trinity. That was a great lead-off presentation for our panel, and a fantastic keying up of the question I have for you, Katie, because as we discovered in our campaign, when we first went to the city, we were surprised to find that the city's bank manager and financial manager were already open to hearing about this. As the campaign went along, we discovered there was a reason for that. The reason for that is sitting right there in that chair. Katie was already advocating inside the system to get the city to be receptive to the idea of sponsoring and starting a public bank. So what I'd like to ask you, Katie, to address is, how did, well, I'll just name him, Howard Chan, kill this thing at the 11th hour, and what insight can you give us about revitalizing this campaign after it got so close and then was torpedoed?
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. I think this might be my first town hall since leaving office a year ago, and I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. I haven't gone away. I've just been resting. I'm still doing work, don't worry. But really excited to be here to talk about this. And yeah, the idea for a public bank, so much of that inspiration came from the amazing work that Trinity and her coalition did, but so much of it started before then, right? It started with the Sacramento Community Land Trust. You know, it started with watching the horrors at Standing Rock and really starting to understand the connections between our financial institutions and these awful human rights abuses that were happening all over the country and all over the world. And when I came into office, you may recall that there was another crisis going on called the COVID-19 pandemic. I actually won my election 3 weeks before the shutdown. So I had a lot of time to sit and think about what we were going to try to do. How would we rebuild? How would we use this like unique opportunity of all this public money, this stimulus, this investment from the federal government to try to figure out what we do next? We had people's budget underway that we helped start, and like just so many efforts to really look at how do we use our money better? How do we invest so that next time there's a crisis, and in this crisis, we don't keep seeing the same patterns reemerge over and over again. So watching the public bank start at the state level, seeing that amazing bill pass, seeing other cities and counties start to take it on, I started asking a lot of questions. And it wasn't just of our city treasurer, who at first was not supportive of the idea, but we were doing this little thing called a performance evaluation. And I may or may not have said on my performance evaluation that one of his critiques was that he doesn't seem to entertain new ideas. And that seemed to catch his attention. And he said, wait a minute. So, you know, I said this to you and you basically said, yeah, that's cool, little girl, and then sent me away. And now suddenly he came back and said, wait, I want to hear more about this. You have more information you can share with us. So that worked well. But honestly, it was the community coming forward at that same time and saying, hey, wait a minute, what would this look like? But it was also so much more than that. The city of Sacramento already lends money at low to no interest rates to projects around town. It's really about who you know, right? We lend it to developers that we like. You know, we lend it to big businesses. We give people tax credits, tax breaks. We give them zero interest loans. And it really isn't fair to the public because it really is about who can call the mayor, who can call that city council member to get that access to that capital. Because something that's unique about Sacramento is we actually do manage a lot of capital, which is why these business and feasibility plans are so important. Every city and jurisdiction is unique. Our city treasurer is an incredibly qualified individual with a very small but mighty team. They manage all of our investments in-house. We have all of our own water rights intact still. We run our own utilities. I mean, we have a substantial amount of capital that is sitting in the bays waiting for when they're going to be needed for those big infrastructure investments and improvements that we could be using to invest in projects that could be increasing our resiliency and our economic background as a community. And so it was putting these things together as well as meeting with some really frustrated, affordable, like good developers. And I will say this, I say it like this because people think I think all developers are evil, and I don't. There were a few guys in my district who were trying really hard to figure out how do we build lower cost housing. It can't be this expensive to do. We've got to figure it out. And what they kept bumping up against, and I know we'll hear more about this from our friend, was the commercial lenders. The rates that they were getting were not based on their own business plan or model. It was based on what those lenders saw in the community. And they see, hey, I'm sorry, I see that you can rent a one-bedroom apartment for $2,000 in Sacramento, so I'm kind of expecting that rate of return on that one-bedroom apartment you're building. And they were so frustrated. And they're like, there's got to be a way for the city to get us access. Like, we'll pay you back. We'll pay back interest. That's not the problem. The problem is this rate of return that these commercial lenders are asking us for. It's making it impossible for us to list things, and it's creating an incentive for people to list them really high and keep them vacant because they get tax reductions for this, right? So it's created this whole perverse universe that was making housing more and more unaffordable in our region. So all of these things come together with my own environmental justice values, and I say, hey, this just makes sense. It really just makes sense. And that's eventually how we got the treasurer on board. Was actually, he went to a California Public Banking Alliance webinar, I believe. I said, ooh, look at this, John. Like, you should go to this webinar and check it out. And his whole staff went, and they circled back to me the next day and said, oh my gosh, I think we could do this here. And I'm like, but it doesn't cost nothing, right? It does require buy-in, it does require investment, and it does require that business plan, and it's super critical, and it's not super cheap. You know, you can't just throw that together with a bunch of volunteers. You do need like financial people and folks who come in and model and look at things and figure out what it would take for it to be sustainable. So we put it on the agenda, and the way that he capsized it I say he, is the city council. We asked for 250,000, and they said, okay, we're going to approve 50,000, and we can go up higher if you need it. So like put out the RFQ, and then you can come back to us if you need more money, but like let's see what the RFQ says, and we'll kind of give you a seed amount to get started. And then as Doug and Goli said, when we did get the RFQ back and we had these amazing teams that had worked on other public banks come forward and say, this is what we can do, this is what it would look like, it did cost closer to $250,000, which is what we had expected. And when we went back to try to get it on the agenda, we were stopped by the city manager at the time. And there were so many other priorities on the dais at that time that it was hard. The only two people that could put things on city council agendas are the city manager or the mayor. So I was kind of stuck in this rock and hard place of like, but you said you thought it was a good idea, remember? Like at that committee meeting, 6 months ago, but we just couldn't quite get it moving. And then obviously the election started happening, other crises occurred, and we just couldn't get this to the top of the agenda. But when I look out here tonight at this crowd, to Chris's question of how do we get it back on the agenda, this is a great start. And I'm not gonna point out the staff in the room who may or may not work for Mayor McCarty or anything, but I will say that like events like this get attention. People like you get attention. Organizing efforts like this get attention. Stories from other jurisdictions get attention. We don't like being left behind. We want to think we're at the front of the curve. So they start hearing stories about LA and other big cities, and they say, hey, wait a minute, like we should be doing that. So I think the time is very right to try to push this again. We have to think outside of the box. We can't keep doing the same things we've been doing. And Sacramento is so incredibly positioned with the resources we have to really show the rest of the country what's possible in a city of our size. So thank you for that question, Chris. I hope that was enough background, and happy to answer more questions you all might have.
All right, thanks, Katie. It's up to us. All right, so Flo, you took an amazing position of leadership a couple of years ago on the public bank, making it a critical issue. You have been known for a long time to be a public health advocate and spoken up about inequities in our city's budget, about the need for more robust climate action. But what is it about a public bank that causes you, with your background, to say, this is the method, this is what we need to move forward?
Yeah, so, I first became aware of North Dakota's public bank when I was the chair of the Measure U Community Advisory Committee. And we were looking at the dollars and really thinking about how could we invest them. And of course, we were sworn in as the very first Measure U Oversight Committee about, I guess it was 9 months before the COVID lockdown. And so we're now in the midst, we're kind of getting our sea legs and getting our committee up and running, and we're thinking about all of the ways that our community is gonna suffer because businesses are closing and people are losing their jobs, and there's all of this work that people are gonna rely on their municipality to do. And so we started thinking about what was possible and what could we do, and that was when it first kind of came on the radar, hey, public banks are actually a really good concept, and we would be in a much better position already if we had one. And then we started sort of just following what was happening in North Dakota and realizing that they were weathering the storm of COVID a lot better than other places for a myriad of reasons, but financially because they had a public bank that could do all of this work. So I entered this conversation from a public health perspective. And, public banking is critical public health infrastructure. And I say that because, sometimes when we think about public health, we think about like hospitals and we think about clinics and emergency response and some of the things that are sort of traditional public health. But the strongest predictors of health are not the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes or hour you might spend with your healthcare provider. It's everything else that's happening in your community. It's housing stability, it's income security, it's safe neighborhoods, it's clean environments, it's the ability to withstand those emergencies when they happen and to be able to recover. And so a public bank has been basically a tool that helps municipalities to strengthen all of those things at the exact same time. And so that's why it's so critical. So I love all the technical details that have been shared here. I was like listening with bated breath. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's great. But I really came at this more from the perspective of like, this is a public health strategy and it should be named and framed as one because it's an opportunity for us to do something different to be able to actually meaningfully change people's lives. And so I just wrote down a few things to make sure, because I could probably talk about this for a very long time. But, this is a public health strategy in part because it can stabilize communities. And that really is health. Like, when we have that stability in our communities, we are healthier. We live longer lives. There is, the California Endowment a few years ago did this campaign where they were talking about how your zip code determines your life expectancy. And they were comparing often neighboring zip codes and showing the difference in life expectancy was almost 20 years. So you're looking at a brand new baby in a neonatal ward, and they're so cute and cuddly, and you're going, you're gonna live 20 years less than this other person simply because of the neighborhood you were born in. That should give us all pause. So when we think about stabilizing this is one of the strongest drivers of stress-related illness, poor mental health, and a shorter life expectancy is not having stability in communities, not having those community investments. So when we say every day that decisions that are made in our communities really are life and death decisions, they are, because they are impacting that stability and the environment that we have. And so when families aren't one emergency away from, a complete crisis, health outcomes improve. And that has an impact across generations. So just thinking about the way in which the stress environment that you're in creates an epigenetic response, which basically is how your genes express themselves that can be passed down over generations. And so a lot of what we think about as being genetically determined, my parents had diabetes, so I'm going to have diabetes, actually is your parents lived in a certain environment and you were probably born into that same environment. And so your genes are expressing in the same way, in part because of that environment. And that is the majority. In fact, when it comes to diabetes, 94% of it is the actual environment that your genes are in that causes them to express or not. And so we think about it as genetic, but it's actually not, it's environmental. And so that's where public banks have this ability to shape that environment in critical ways. They also can help build resilience before emergencies hit. So what would it have looked like if we had had this public bank and had these investments and then experienced COVID? So much of the infrastructure, so much of what was needed to be able to make sure that businesses could stay open, that employees could still be paid, that we could stabilize would have happened, and we wouldn't have been waiting for CARES Act dollars or the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to come in to be able to start that work. We would have already been in a position to be able to invest, and we would have actually had the money to be able to do things like, shocker, emergency preparedness. Because one of the things that really has frustrated me is that most of our emergency preparedness plans have not been updated, at least before the iPhone was created. And if you just think about that for a moment, that means that the ways that we can do alerts, the way that we share information, none of that is factoring into how we do that. And so if we had public banks, we would actually have been in a position where we could have actually funded some of those positions to be able to actually prepare ourselves for emergencies, so we weren't trying to build the runway as we were also trying to fly the plane. We also are sort of able to reduce inequities by design, right? So health inequities don't happen by accident. They're the result of systems that systematically disinvest in certain communities. And so a public bank is ultimately structured to be able to do things like prioritize lending in historically redlined communities. And we see, even with our tree canopy here in Sacramento, that depending on where you were, the city continued to manage trees, or it just kind of let you live in a heat desert. Little decisions like that are huge ones. And so you're able to support the Black and brown and women and worker-owned enterprises. You're able to partner with CDFIs, as we talked about earlier, and community lenders to expand reach. So all of those things exist. And that's not charity, that's actually just correcting a market failure. And I'm so glad in this space that we're talking about that. And correcting that market failure has real market consequences. And measurable health outcome consequences as well. And then, of course, keeping the dollars circulating locally. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people get excited about this, because we are taking millions of our public dollars and sending them off to other communities and never seeing that money come back. And we could have that money circulating locally. And that means that we're reinvesting in this structural shift. This is not a one-time program. This is, when we spend this money, we keep having this money to spend again. And that allows us to be in a better position to be able to shape our local environment. And then, of course, sort of lastly, as I close up, like it aligns with prevention, right? So public health is always about moving upstream. We're not just trying to respond to the bad thing that's happening. We're actually trying to learn from it in that moment and say, what could we do next time to prevent somebody else from being in your position, and expand that overall. And so when we have the ability to move upstream, we're always thinking about not just treating illness, but how do we prevent it? How do we prevent the bad things from happening that we can? And then how do we treat the others? And we actually consider treatment to be secondary prevention. Primary prevention is not having a bad thing happen. Secondary prevention is sort of like, doing some screening and treatment to be able to address it. And so we want to always look at primary prevention. And so a public bank is investing in affordable housing, as we've talked about, and climate resilience and clean energy, right? Making sure that we are investing in the ways that make the most sense for us and not funding fossil fuels while we're also saying, yay, we need to do more about climate change. And then also the things that we need in our community, like childcare and elder care and community health infrastructure. All of those things are possible when we have public banks. So every dollar that's invested upstream reduces downstream costs in healthcare and emergency response and social services. So not only are we recycling the dollars in our community, but we're spending them in even smarter ways than we would be otherwise. So why this matters specifically to Sacramento is that we are a large, diverse, and deeply unequal community. And that is an unfortunate reality. We are exposed to significant climate risk. I remember I was in public health school now 21 years ago when Hurricane Katrina happened. And actually I was part of the public health action support team that was deployed to Katrina. And I did not live in Sacramento yet. It would be a year later when I finally, moved here for a fellowship at the Department of Public Health. But the one thing I knew about Sacramento, other than Sacramento, California, because we learned our state capitals in 3rd grade, was that Sacramento was second in risk after New Orleans for having that type of flooding. And so when I think about, the climate risk that we're under, we need to be in a place where we're prepared to be able to not just hold our breath and hope and wish that it doesn't happen, but actually prepare ourselves and make sure we're ready. And then of course, we're growing, but unevenly growing, and we really should be benefiting from that growth as a region and really supporting people who are here. So a public bank really is a long-term tool, and that's why I'm excited about it, because it gives us the ability to align economic development with health outcomes, to support regional resilience rather than just short-term profit, and to be able to lead with our values and care, to lead with love, something that we often don't talk about in government and we often don't talk about in municipalities, but that's really what we're moving to, is actually being able to lead with love and banking with love in a real way to be able to invest in our communities. So the bottom line is that if we're really serious about improving health, about reducing disparities, about preparing for the future, we have to look beyond, can we build another clinic? Can we extend the emergency room? Can we expand the jail and add a health wing into it? We have to actually look into the systems that shape our daily life. And so a public bank is a public health intervention. It is a resilience strategy, and it is a commitment to keeping public resources accountable to the people. And for Sacramento, it's an opportunity to lead, not just with innovation, but also with care.
Well, I feel bad for you, Mark, having to go after that. But all right, so at any rate, we asked Mark to join this panel because he has immersed himself in the question of how do we build more affordable housing. And for those of you in the room who have gotten involved in any public bank or banking discussion, you have probably been challenged about, well, how is this really going to work? What is it going to do? And that's why we asked Mark to join us tonight, so we can walk out of this room better prepared to understand and communicate to others how public banks are essential if infrastructure for addressing affordable housing, our biggest challenge politically and economically in this community.
We good? Okay. Thank you, Chris. I feel much better now. Having said that. So anybody who has done some advocacy around affordable housing knows that it takes about 2 minutes to get into the weeds. It is a very complex topic. And so tonight, I'm going to try to combine the very complex topic of affordable housing finance with the very complex topic of public banking. And there are ways to conceptualize and to think about public banking and its relationship to housing that are pretty straightforward and simple. But we thought we would give you some bullet points and some talking points. Stay out of the weeds, but we have these sheets distributed tonight. If you don't mind picking up your new tool for California's housing crisis, the public bank, I'm going to kind of follow that pretty closely. But we want people to be able to talk about the connection between public banking and affordable housing finance with some specificity. So let's do that. I wanted to start off though by providing a little bit of historical context. Most of us here looking around, and I say this gently, can remember back in the day when we had public housing as kind of the cornerstone of our affordable housing policy in this country. Now, public housing is long gone. It's sustained at minimal levels right now. Instead, we have a new system, public-private system. It's very complicated and very much slanted toward the extraction of value by financial players. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what a public bank can do to change that, to change the balance, to claw back some of those, some of the value for our communities. So here we are. If you go to the California Housing Alliance website, which is a very helpful place to go, they will tell you that when they established goals for affordable housing creation some 10 years ago, they had roughly about 100,000 units per year that they were hoping could be created. Well, we're at about 15% of that goal. So the system that we have right now, it's not working. What could a public bank do to change that? So I'm going to give you the key benefits of housing, of public banking for housing. The first one you'll see on the list, enables rapid acquisition. So right now when distressed properties come into the market, what happens is that the major players, the Wall Street players, whether it's private equity or other financial firms, will jump in and they will scoop up those properties because they have the advantage of being very liquid. They have a lot of cash on hand. There was some legislation in 2020, I think, SB 1079, that tried to protect those properties from Wall Street. To a certain extent, that legislation has been successful, but a public bank would go further and would allow the bank to pre-certify and provide rapid funding for nonprofits to step in and scoop up these properties before the banks and the private equity interests could jump in and keep those properties affordable. So that's the first bullet. The second one, create a permanent revolving fund. This has been mentioned several times. What happens when you privatize anything, but certainly housing, the finance charges go to the private entities. So when we set up a public bank and we are generating the loans publicly, the payback, the payment back, the debt service goes back into the community, goes back into our bank. It doesn't leave, doesn't go to Wall Street. And so we continue to feed that resource loop with debt service payments that come from these projects that we're financing. Saves and preserves existing homes. Beyond quick purchases, the bank offers tailored loans to repair and modernize our existing affordable housing stock, the fastest, most cost-effective, and add stable units. That is a feature and a potential of public banking that we don't currently have in the present system. Simplifies and accelerates development. The bank can act as a single reliable coordinator for complex housing projects, combining different funding sources, city, state, federal, into one streamlined process. This reduces delays, cuts red tape, and gets homes built faster, lowering overall costs. This is a really important point, and this is the way that a public bank accelerates the process of building affordable housing. There are really two components to that. The first one is that by offering loans at lower rates, what happens is the debt service on those projects goes down, and so that puts a smaller demand on the equity requirement for that project. So what happens is you bring down lower, debt costs, and what you had is could be a housing bond, could be any source of equity, can be spread over more projects because you're not having to cover for those high levels of debt service. So that's one way that you get more housing with a public bank. The second way is by coordinating all these different financial entities that get involved in the finance of affordable housing. There are many. You look at they call it the finance stack. You look at the finance stack for a typical affordable housing project, and it may have between 10 and 15 different components. And all these have their requirements, their application process, the delays, the complexity, just layer upon layer of difficulty in getting these projects to happen at all, to get them paid for. Well, if you have a public bank, then you can offer a coordination of all of that. And you can simplify and bring all of those different funding sources under one roof. And it can be administered in a very efficient way for people, for developers, nonprofits especially, that are looking for an easier path. The next bullet is builds missing middle workforce housing. It can finance homes for teachers, nurses, and service workers, projects that are vital but often don't qualify for complex federal subsidy programs addressing a major gap in the market. And that is definitely the case. The next bullet, and this is the most important one, I think I've alluded to it already, but it underscores, makes every subsidy dollar work harder. By providing low-cost construction loans, the bank reduces a project's overall debt. This means scarce federal and state affordable housing credits can be stretched to build more units or achieve deeper, more permanent affordability. And it's the crucial thing, because there's this relationship between debt and equity. And if you bring down the debt service, the debt costs, then suddenly you don't need as much equity. And you can spread that equity over more projects, or you can add equity to a project to make it more deeply affordable for the lowest income folks. The last bullet we have here is builds essential infrastructure for scale. The bank provides the professional, accountable system needed to deploy large-scale future public investments, for instance, housing bonds, with maximum efficiency and leverage. It ensures these funds are reused and have compounding impact. So again, the theme of payments that ordinarily would go to a bank, ordinarily go to Wall Street, instead going to our public facility, our public utility, the public bank, and staying in our community to be recycled for future lending, and around it goes. So that's the kind of structure you need if you're going to start producing affordable housing at scale, because we are way behind the goals that we have and the needs that are out there for affordable housing construction, and we're going to need a mechanism like the public bank to coordinate and to bring down borrowing costs so that we can spread the equity that we have as far as we possibly can. So the bottom line, to solve a crisis of this magnitude, we need to move beyond fragmented temporary fixes. A California public bank offers a transformative approach, a permanent self-replenishing financial tool designed for the public good. It is an indispensable infrastructure that makes every housing dollar go further, protects the homes we have, and builds the stable, affordable future California needs. Thanks.
And thank you all. I'm going to turn the podium back over to Trinity in just a second to give us a summary, because we're getting close to the end and we want to make sure that you all have a chance to ask some questions as well. People have challenged me repeatedly over the last few weeks to say something about climate, and I was going to just ask a question of these very erudite panelists, but just in the interest of letting the public ask questions, you know, one thing I thought about is we had a big grant at the city of Sacramento from Volkswagen when they cheated on diesel engines. And the city installed all these EV chargers all over the place. And then they stopped because they wouldn't go out and find new money. And they couldn't find cheap money because we didn't have a public bank. So they said, oh, it's too expensive to do that anymore. And they haven't. So in some garages, there are EV chargers, and others not so much. And we really need EV chargers, as we all know, in community housing, in apartments, places where people basically don't have the ability to buy their own charger. They need a shared charger. And we know that when people charge their cars, what do? They pay for the energy. So the money does come back into the system, but right now we don't have a public place for that money to go. Is that okay, Katie? Or
Is it on? Hello, there we go, thank you. Yeah, I think another option that I personally was affected by, I mean, I was actually car-free for my entire first campaign. And part of the way that I was able to be car-free was both I lived in Midtown, very privileged, but also we had the gig cars, the electric vehicles that were around town. And that was the option that also came from the Electrify America settlement, was to say, hey, we're gonna subsidize through AAA this car share service so that you don't need to have a driveway to charge a vehicle, you can just go. And I had to buy a car shortly after COVID because it went away. The money went away and the program went away. And I remember getting contacted by the lobbyists that said, sorry, I know this was a really successful program, but like, we can't do this anymore. And like, that's the type of multifaceted approach we needed to really like decarbonize our city. And it went away when the money went away because we just didn't invest it. Right, Chris?
right. Thank you, Katie. And Trinity is going to close out the panel, and then we're going to open it up for questions by telling us a little bit about the possibility of advocacy around a statewide bank and some of the other advocacy campaigns that we can get involved in this year at the legislature to grow this movement.
Thank you, Chris. So we've heard a lot of insights about the need, the urgency, the benefits, advantages of public bank around health, housing, climate. So now we turn to the state public bank. This is the systemic lever, and this is how we reduce California's vulnerability to volatility while financing Californians' needs at scale. California right now depends on the federal government for over a third of our budget. So in the 25-26 budget, that's over $175 billion coming from the federal government. That's not even counting funds that go directly to cities and other entities. So as we're seeing now under the Trump administration, as we mentioned, many core funding streams are getting hit, from housing, climate, small business, all else. We look at the greenhouse gas reduction fund, speaking of climate, that was a $20 billion pot of funds that was greenlit by the Biden administration to support clean energy and climate projects. That $20 billion pot of money is now frozen, clawed back, tied up in courts. The New York City saw $80 million in FEMA funds clawed back by the Biden by the Trump administration. So, meanwhile, California is the fourth largest economy in the world. We generate an enormous amount of public revenue, about $300 billion in revenue each year. So, as we discussed with municipal banks, the same logic applies. Do we continue routing our public dollars to private financial institutions and big banks that extract fees and profit from our communities while prioritizing private shareholder returns, or do we build public financial infrastructure and public financial backbone so that we can invest in our own priorities while reducing our exposure to federal volatility and Wall Street disinvestment? So it's a common sense, solution. So local public banks and state public banks work together synergistically. So they both support each other in a public financial ecosystem. So local public banks would focus on smaller projects. They would create tailored solutions at the city and municipal and the county level, while a state public bank would support projects that impact large swaths of Californians. So you're talking affordable housing, big infrastructure projects, supporting community lenders, local governments. So as we're moving forward with implementation on municipal banks and regional banks, we're also working to build as I mentioned, a public financial ecosystem that ties on all three levels of all three of our core areas. One is municipal banks, two is the state bank that brings scale, and three is CalAccount. And I just want to quickly pivot to discuss CalAccount. There's a printout with a flyer about the CalAccount program, and this is an exciting initiative. This is the CalAccount program is our third priority, our third focus area, and the CalAccount program is our proposal to create a zero-cost, zero-fee, zero-penalty bank account for all Californians. It doesn't create a bank, but it partners with existing financial institutions, plugs into their infrastructure and ATMs to provide this free account. And why is this important? Over 7 million Californians right now are unbanked or underbanked. That means they don't have access to a bank account, they don't have adequate access to a bank account, so they're turning to payday lenders and check cashers, which is gouging working people for the little money that they have. So this is about putting more money in working people's pockets. This is about providing banking as a utility, as a public utility that is free and accessible to all people. This is about leveling the playing field. So in 2021, we passed the California Public Banking Option Act that then created a Blue Ribbon Commission that we went through 2 years of Blue Ribbon Commission led by State Treasurer Fiona Ma, and that was then approved by the legislature just last year. So we have now received the green light from the legislature to move forward with phase 1 of the implementation plan for the CalAccount program. And once this is implemented, this will be the nation's first universal banking services program. So that's our, I just wanted to zoom out a bit to kind of connect the dots on our work. So municipal banks is about local control, a state bank brings scale, and the CalAccount program is about financial inclusion. So on the state public bank front, this year we are proposing, we're gearing up for an exciting state bank campaign, and we are proposing to scale up the existing California iBank. So California has an existing, it's called iBank, it's a California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. It's a state financing tool that supports loans and financing for public infrastructure and economic development projects. It also has programs that support small businesses and climate. It's not a bank, even though there's a bank in its name. It's not a bank because it's not a depository institution, and that is hence our goal is to expand it to become a depository so it can activate that times 10 leverage power, so we can leverage California's massive resources to support our needs. And that is especially important right now, especially with billions of dollars in funding getting cut or scaled back from the current administration. So it is common sense and practical solution for us to be able to create a tool, a sustainable tool at the local level so that we can save money, reduce borrowing costs, and leverage our public revenues to support public good. So that is the gearing up right now. We're going to be in the state legislature tomorrow, and we're working on authors and really building out. We're also concurrently building out a coalition, bringing on co-sponsors. But I do want to quickly add, because the Bank of North Dakota is a 100-year-old public bank. In the United States, public banking is relatively kind of unknown, but there are internationally, there are over 900 public banks with over $50 trillion in assets. And the BND is a bank in a red state that has survived the economic crash of 2008. It has more community banks per capita than any other state during the pandemic, returned more PPP loans to support community members and small businesses. And this is, every year, it returns hundreds of millions of dollars back into the general fund. Since its founding, over $1 billion. So California can do the same at scale, and this really is the moment, because otherwise we're staring at down the barrel of deficits, and the only other alternative is to borrow, increase debt, cut essential services, or raise taxes. So this is a common sense and practical solution for our state and for our cities, so that we can be able to mobilize public revenue for public good.
Thank you, Trinity. And for those of you who are interested at the end of tonight, if you've got time tomorrow and want to join her up at Capitol Hill, please check in with her.
Yeah,
But before-
1021 O Street. So the Capitol building is under renovation, so all the legislators are at 1021 O Street, 10 a.m. If you're interested, come see me
And now
afterwards.
you know who Trinity is, so simple.
Doug and Goli will be there. I think Chris will be there. There we go. I think Mark is going to be there as well, so join us.
So, thank you. I want to acknowledge City Councilman Roger Dickinson, who has come tonight to join us. Thank you for showing up, and as you can see, there are a lot of people here who are fans of the public bank, and I'm going to share something about Roger. Back several years ago, when the coalition and SacAct first began this campaign, Roger, as a member of the local government commission, which was later renamed Civic Well, was an advisor, a pro bono advisor about how to organize a campaign to influence the city council. We need to get back to that majority vote, so we're counting on you. So we have a few minutes left. Has anybody got a question? If you do, please come up to this microphone and just line up, because we're not going to have time for a ton of questions, and I'm sorry about that, but we'll have to end at 8. So go ahead.
Okay. How can we build bridges with our area's Trump voters? This is a nonpartisan thing. And I get in trouble with all of my liberal friends when I mention that I voted for Trump because I wanted Bobby Kennedy to clean up health. So if 1/5 of the worldwide banks are public banks, 1/5 of the financing in the world is publicly banked, we Americans don't know that. And what can we do to change that?
Can you hear me? Oh, there it goes. I think it's a very practical solution. It's the sort of thing like taking money out of the big corporate hands and keeping it in the community is a really easy message. And so it's really about how does everybody in this room talk to more people who don't normally come to this room about like, hey, I know we don't always agree, but in this case, like, can we all agree that sending our money to these billionaire bankers at the national and international level is not in our best interest? I was telling a short story before we started about a guy in the Central Valley who's got this campaign to municipalize the power lines. He's doing it in the Central Valley of California, and he's doing it in Republican jurisdictions because it just makes sense. They don't like PG&E. They're taking too much of their money. Give us our money back. So there is something there if we learn to talk to each other in those sort of really practical values-based terms.
Oh, and I forgot to ask. Can you please share your name with us?
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Nia Moreweathers. I'm here representing the Sacramento Racial Equity Alliance tonight. I had a question concerning oversight. As somebody who has been a policy advocate in the city of Sacramento for 7+ years now, I grow weary of promises made by our city officials and just government around how their initiatives are going to positively impact our communities, particularly our marginalized communities. And so I wonder, with a public bank, what does community oversight look like, right? I have a kind of like a rough understanding of what a public bank looks like now. Thank you for the information. But I would want to know, like, how can we ensure that if the projects the public bank is investing in ain't tea, like, how do we fix that? What does oversight look like? Yeah.
I can take that. So the bill that we created at the state level was a lightweight bill where we didn't define the governance structure or the lending priorities, knowing that a public bank in Central Valley is going to look different than coastal progressive cities. So it is up to the local governments and constituents to be able to design a bank that has practical governance, that has community oversight, but that's going to depend on each level. But having said that, like, this isn't a bank that's run by city council, right? This is a separate nonprofit public corporation. It's got its own board of directors, and even as cities begin the process of designing their governance structure, it also has to, the state and federal regulatory approval will hinge on it not having a revolving political door. So there can't be any political interference. Otherwise, at the end of the day, this is a bank. So it's going to have, rigorous, strict oversight. California public banks will have 4 levels of oversight. So that's the local governing body, there's the local government, there are constituents also adding oversight. As it's a public institution, it's subjected to the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, and state and federal regulatory approval. So there's 4 levels of oversight. And at the end of the day, like every other institution, it's up to constituents to constantly be a part and ensure that the lending and investment priorities are reflective to the needs of the communities. But where a public bank brings power is that it brings transparency to the use of public funds. Because right now, our city dollars are parked in Wall Street banks. Where those how those dollars are used and leveraged, you have no say in it, because those decisions are made behind closed boardroom doors. So a public bank, as a public institution, opens up the possibilities for the general public to be able to have input and as part of, and I'll also add is, as cities are moving forward with designing the feasibility study and the business plan, part of that work requires consultants to meet with stakeholders to actually get, be able to incorporate the input from communities. And as these governance structures are being designed, I know East Bay has a governance structure designed. The goal of the California public banking movement is to also include the voices of people who have been impacted by the banking system, have been marginalized, have been ignored. So that it's all still very fluid and moving, but if governance is particularly important. So we encourage constituents to be part of the movement and building and designing it to make sure that it is as responsive to the needs of the people as possible.
I have to add to this briefly because, how many of you in this room are members of Golden One Credit Union? Okay, how many of you voted for the stadium downtown? And I say this to say that, this is a credit union that's already not-for-profit that took our money and invested it in a project without asking us. And the council voted on it. We didn't vote on it. I didn't get a choice in that. I don't think Safe Credit Union gave them a choice in the convention center either. So to the point that Trinity is making, Nia was a part in Trinity, she was a part of actually creating a fund, a $40 million a year fund for youth in the city. They designed that. They passed it by the voters. It was the first of its kind. We thought we took care of all of that, and yet somehow it continues to not quite be implemented the way we thought it was going to be.
Implementation is important.
Yeah, so I think this is an opportunity to the point around how each one's going to look different. What does that look like for us? What is the accountability for board members if they do make decisions that aren't aligned? What are the checks and balances so that these meetings aren't happening at 2 p.m. on a Monday, that when we can't get there? How do we ensure we're building it different and learning from the unfortunate mistakes that we've seen play out here at the local level? So,
Thank you.
Real quick before we take the next question, because we are supposed to be done at 8, but we have time for you. this little half sheet on your chairs, we really do look for your input. So if you haven't started yet, please start writing down some answers to these questions. And thanks to Muriel Strand, who's in the back, who came up with this little questionnaire. And this is all about our next steps forward. So you can participate in that.
Hello, my name is Ryder, and I've been doing my own personal research about a public banking institution in Sacramento. And from my research, it appears that a non-depository institution would be in the interest of the city of Sacramento for immediate capitalization and return on funds. Could you provide some, this might be better for Katie and Trinity, but can you provide some insight on how a depository model may be more beneficial? Because from all my research, it appears that the non-depository is the way to go.
It's called a municipal finance corporation, which is a strategy that San Francisco actually is doing. So it's essentially like a revolving loan where, you started with the basic capital, then you lend out, and then as those loans are repaid, it comes back. So in that way, you're keeping, the funds within a city rather than right now you're paying Wall Street banks or private financial institutions money. That money essentially leaves the community, doesn't return. So what San Francisco is doing is starting with the Municipal Finance Corporation and then scaling that up into a full-scale depository over several years. So once it proves that it can responsibly manage public funds and show that the positive benefits of this MFC, then the goal is to scale into a full-scale depository. That's when you can activate your times 10 leverage power and go from $1 million to $10 million. And that's really the key for us to be able to fund the things that we need.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. I think it's a fabulous idea, Ruth Holton Hudson. How is it initially capitalized? Where do you get the initial funds for the bank to start lending?
Yeah, does anyone want? Okay. Capitalization can, there isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a set amount. Each bank is going to look different, but capitalization the city can bank its existing funds. That's money that's sitting in a bank that's earning next to zero in interest and not being used to support the community. There are reserves that can be used. You can issue bonds. So there's various capitalization methods, and part of that feasibility study and business plan and why that's so crucial will be the consultants sitting down and mapping out capitalization strategies and mapping out return of investments. So that's a big question, and how do you pay for the thing that's supposed to pay for everything else? And that's why that first step is so important.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Webster, and first I just want to say thank you, Trinity. Your passion is really infectious, and it's really exciting to see someone so passionate about something that's so important. My question was, how much work needs to be done to get the viability study back on the city agenda to get the ball back rolling?
It needs to get back on the agenda. I think it's, council members can submit forms to get in front of the mayor for consideration to put things on the agenda, to get it on either the budget subcommittee or the full city council agenda so that there can be a vote to direct, the city manager. But also in the city of Sacramento, the city manager has discretionary authority up to $250,000. So we do have a new city manager in Sacramento. She just got started. I don't know if she's been briefed on this yet, but it is possible that someone says, hey, the council voted on $50K with the option to try to extend. Can you give us the rest of this money? I mean, it is something that is hard for someone who's not financial to understand, but I think it is something that's easily explained, as you've seen tonight. So there's a few different pathways to try to build. It's just old school organizing, right? To get those votes and to get, if enough council members ask her to do it, then, they're her bosses. So in theory, that should happen.
What can folks in the room do to help make this happen?
I mean, I think organizing, you need the 5 votes, right? You need the votes across the city. And so, I'm tempted to ask what district everybody in here lives in, but I'm not going to because we're almost out of time. But how do you organize in parts of the community that might not be in this room? How do you get to Mr. Dickinson's district in D2? How do we make sure that folks in D6 and D5 are all engaged so that they're all calling their city council members?
So here's your answer direct to you.
Go and talk to Chris.
Yeah, sorry, Kate, but I didn't. People are standing up and leaving. I'm getting badgered. Make sure that they get this. So. You can use this QR code or that bit.ly link, and you can send letters to all the council people and the county supervisors, asking them to take the next step to start a public bank. So,
With one click, you can send over 20 letters with one click. So please do that right now, if you can. 29, I'm sorry, 29.
you don't even have to wait till tomorrow. I'm sorry, but she was in line before, and she'll be our last, except it's the last question before. That's the last one?
Well,
Yeah.
I would ask you to let more people ask questions. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm Karen Gale, and thank you. And where do the city council members stand now? We must have some idea of their sympathy to this obviously great idea. And what, in an ideal world, the best scenario, when's the soonest San Francisco, East Bay, whatever, any of these groups could see it actually happening in the best scenario?
So where do the council members stand now? We've met with all of them except for Katie Maple. We have a meeting with Katie Maple tomorrow, actually. But she did send us a beautiful letter saying that she was fully engaged and fully supportive of a public bank. So we got one right there. And I think four of the current council members voted for the public bank in '23, and they're still on the council. It's just a matter of getting them back on board and getting the thing started again. And then, Katie,
I mean,
go ahead.
this is the old school organizing part, right? Like, who do they listen to? I think this is something that, in my time in office, I talked to a lot of for-profit developers. Believe it or not, people think that I never talk to anybody. But I did talk to a lot of for-profit developers who were interested in building more mixed income housing, who were very intrigued by the idea of having a public bank option. So there are members who might not listen to climate folks, who might be really interested in hearing from like Satiri Kolokotronis, who was very excited about the idea of getting a public bank going and how that could help his projects. So it's just power mapping these folks. And that's what I mean in terms of neighborhood organizing. We get, when you're on the city council, you're inundated with emails all the time. But if you hear from somebody in your district, it should carry weight in general because it's a good idea, but it carries extra weight for folks who understand that, like, hey, the people who vote for you are actually looking for you to do something like this. So got to look at that map, make sure we're covering all the bases.
Thank you, Katie. All right, I think we're... Trinity, you want to take that?
In LA, we now have a majority of 9 LA City Councils putting in their own discretionary dollars to fund the feasibility study. But, and that is, LA, as many people know, is a very politically complex, just to say it lightly, political area. San Francisco and East Bay, more progressive local governments are moving a lot faster. San Francisco is likely doing a ballot measure this year to capitalize their green bank, their green bank municipal finance corporation that will then scale up to a full-scale public bank. East Bay has the support of their county treasurer, Alameda County Treasurer Hank Levy. So, this at the end of the day, we are challenging a 400-year-old financial, a deeply entrenched industry. So it takes time. But even since the regulations were finalized in 2022, look at all the movement that's happening across the state and even the nation. Mayor Memdani is supportive of public banking, so we're really excited to have the East Coast, West Coast alignment on this. And just recently, Senator Elizabeth Warren joined our webinar backing public banking. So this is really the moment in history for us to stand up and fight and put the power of money in the hands of the people. So I don't have I can't answer directly when we should see these banks up, but we hope, soon. We know there are a lot of hurdles ahead because at the end of the day, banking and finance is a very complex language, and a lot of our job is to be able to translate into human terms and be able to build the political capital and the community to support, to handhold electeds and be able to take this as, seriously. So there's a lot of momentum, so we hope soon.
Thank you. Can I ask you to please put that slide back up? And then, because we promised we'd be out by 8, and that's the time we're at now, we'd like to invite you all up for a group photo, if you'd like to be a part of a group photo. Yeah, no, Dan. We'll join you down there for a group photo.
And while you're doing that, you guys just don't forget about the QR code. It's also listed in the back. And please save the date, March 24th. That's when we're going to try to go to City Council and push for the public bank.
All right, anybody who wants to be in the photo, come on up and line up right here, line up. We want a big, this is part of our outreach to City Council. Come on out here, we get a group photo of everybody. Absolutely, when they see the hordes of people that want a public bank in Sacramento, how could they say no? That's right, let's create history. Come on up here, Flo. Come on, Mark. All right, come on up here. Let's get a picture of everybody. We got someone back there that can take a picture? Yeah. All right.
Take a picture. I'll take a picture.
Yeah, who's taking the picture? I'll take the picture. All right, come on in. We want everybody. This is a group effort. All right. Everybody look at my wife, Dr. Sahba. Come on in. All right. All right, everybody look, start snapping. Here we go. Sacramento Public Bank. We want a public bank. All right. Thank you everyone for being here.